Hey, it's Ramsey Dewey over here in Shanghai, China. Welcome to another edition of Q&A with a Coach. A common question I get asked is, Ramsey, why do you live in China? And I suppose a simple answer to that is so that I can wear this hat and nobody will question me. On to the next question. So today we have a question from our friend Mark, who says, Ramsey, when it comes to making weight for a fight, what is your opinion on dieting down to fighting weight without cutting versus the dieting to a specific weight and then cutting the water weight from there? Could you discuss the pros and cons of each? Okay. Before I answer that question for you, I'm going to tell you this. I think weight cutting should go away. Day of weigh-ins should be the way of the future. It should. I wish weight cutting could just go away. It almost killed me once, man. I almost killed myself cutting weight for a stupid fight that I was tricked into doing, man. Cut almost 30 pounds of water weight in less than 24 hours, man. No IVs to rehydrate, nothing like that. Did it in oh man, it was terrible. Anyway, almost killed me. I hate that. Absolutely hate it. And the fact that people have died cutting less weight than that and they continue to do so is terrible, and it sucks. And it ruins your performance. I mean, that ruined my performance. I was barely able to walk. So the pros and the cons. The more weight you cut, the worse you are going to perform. Notice there's a difference between cutting weight and losing weight. Cutting weight is sweating off water weight. It's the quick temporary loss of weight. Weight loss, that's when we're talking about changing our body composition. We lose fat or we lose muscle on a more permanent basis. Okay? So when I say cutting weight, I'm talking about sweating it off, losing weight, losing actual body tissue. Short term, long term. So the pros and the cons. If we are going to live in the real world as opposed to the idealistic fantasy world. I mean, I shouldn't even say it's a fantasy world, because when I started fighting professionally, all of the weigh-ins were day of. Yeah. So I did a few fights at 155 pounds. I showed up weighing 155 pounds. I stepped on the scales the day of, about an hour before I stepped in the ring or in the cage to fight at 155 pounds, and so did my opponent. When I fought at welterweight, man, I didn't tip the scales at 170, the weight limit. I think it was like 160 or 165 at the heaviest. When I fought as a middleweight, I just barely tipped the scales at 171 pounds. Definitely didn't reach the far end of 185. So those were day of weigh-ins. There wasn't time to cut weight. There wasn't time to sweat off anything. So you couldn't put it back on. When we sweat off weight, what happens? Why is that bad for you? We lose water, which is important. It keeps us alive. We're mostly water. But more importantly, we lose electrolytes. What are electrolytes? Electrolytes are dissolved salts. Dissolved salts in water. If you put sodium chloride or some other salt, potassium chloride, there are a bunch of different salts. It's not just table salt. But when you put that in water, the ions separate. There's a negative and a positive ion. It's an ionic bond. Remember your high school chemistry, covalent bonds, ionic bonds? Well, these are the ionic ones. It's kind of like magnets sticking together, sort of. There's a positive charge and a negative charge, and they separate in the water. Why does that matter? Well, throughout your body is a nervous system. And a nervous system is kind of like electrical wiring, because electrical signals run through, back and forth through this nervous system. carrying messages from parts of your body to the brain. So when I move my finger like this, there is an electrical current running back and forth from my brain to this finger, sending messages saying, move, finger, move, and the finger moves. How does that happen? Because that electricity is running on conduits of electrolytes, dissolved salts in the nerves that conduct electricity. If you have pure distilled water and you try to run an electrical current through it, it doesn't work so well. But if you have minerals in that water, if you have salts, electrolytes dissolved in that water, now it is a perfect conduit of electricity. So your nerves, when you are optimally hydrated and you have the proper amount of electrolytes in your system, that is a perfect conduit of electricity, and it should be. That means you are able to move and fight and punch and all these other things. But when you take that away, when you drain yourself of electrolytes, when you sweat that out, you ever lick your sweat and it tastes salty? Because it is. Because those are the electrolytes coming out in your sweat, out of your nerves. And so you no longer have that perfect conduit when you're severely dehydrated for electrical impulses to carry messages from your brain to the rest of the body, so you don't move so good no more. It can affect your speech and it can affect your motor functions. Like when I cut those 30 pounds for that fight, I could barely stand. The room was spinning. When my opponent put me on the ground and he was a much smaller guy, I felt helpless. Technique be damned, I couldn't move. That's an extreme case. So what if you just cut a little bit? Okay. If you are cutting 10%, that's the upper end of what you should ever cut. Remember, cut means sweat off. For a fight, 10% of your body weight, preferably less. So if you weigh, say, 165 pounds, and you want to get down to 155 to compete as a lightweight, so you don't have to fight the bigger guys in the welterweight division who are cutting down from maybe 200 to get to 170. It's probably wise to sweat off a few pounds. How much? Well, let's do some math. 165 minus 155, you need to sweat off 10 pounds, which is less than 10% of your body weight. That's doable. You can totally do that and still perform well in the fight. That's okay. Would it be better to diet down to 155 so you can fight at 155? Some guys do, some guys have. A lot of guys right now in the UFC are spitting in the face of the traditional wisdom of cutting down to a certain weight so you don't have to fight the bigger guys. I remember Anderson Silva was one of these guys at some point in his career. He walked in to the weigh-ins with a cheeseburger in his hands, which he was eating. He knew his opponent had been working very hard to dehydrate himself to get down to the middleweight division. And Anderson Silva walks into the weigh-ins with the cheeseburger in his hand, takes it onto the scale with him as he eats it, looks his opponent in the eye like, I'm good. Because he wasn't cutting. I don't know if that was the case for all or even most of his fights, but that particular one. And that sent a very interesting message to his opponent. Probably a confusing one, because he was probably thinking, I'm the bigger guy here. Wait, he's not scared. He is not concerned at all about not cutting weight and me having a weight advantage. Because there comes a certain point where it's not an advantage anymore. Like that fight in Singapore where I fought Leandro Issa, a significantly smaller guy. And I was cutting from, what was it, like 176 pounds down to 145? That was not a weight advantage. I mean, I couldn't even put back on all of that water weight overnight. Couldn't. And I didn't feel right for months afterward. Man, I had a fight 3 days later in Xi'an, China, against a member of the China top team, and I still felt like crap. I mean, granted, I had a dislocated shoulder from that Kimura Leandro put on me, but still, felt like garbage 3 days later. I had another fight about a week and a half later in Mongolia, a kickboxing match. And I still felt like crap from that extreme weight cut. So man, do as few pounds on a weight cut as you possibly can. But yeah, what I'm seeing right now is a lot of these younger fighters, these third-generation MMA fighters, who are ignoring conventional wisdom and fighting closer to their walking around weight, are doing really well. And it's shocking people. It's shocking all of those people who keep saying, no, we can't have day of weigh-ins. That's crazy. Except we kind of used to, and it worked really well back then. We didn't have problems. We didn't have people dying trying to make weight. We didn't have people just failing miserably because they had no electrolytes in their system. We didn't have people getting sick over this. Now we do. But I like the direction the sport's going as far as this trend these younger fighters are setting. Fighting close to their walking around weight and doing awesome. Because they don't have to deal with that drama. They don't have to deal with that noise or that stress or the distress on the body. And they might not have the weight advantage, but they have the actual physical advantage as far as energy and being able to, move that finger when the brain says move, finger move. And everything else attached to that finger. Great question. Keep them coming. If you have questions, please leave them in the comments down below. Thank you for watching. Now get out there and train.